Call the meeting of the Diversion Board of Authority to order. The first item will be the roll.
Mr. Vanyo.
Here.
Mr. Pollock.
Here.
Mr. Thorstead.
Here.
Mr. Olson.
Here.
Mr. Wallaker.
Here.
Dr. Mahoney. Mr. Wimmer. Mr. Campbell.
Here.
Ms. Otto.
Okay. Next item, minutes from previous meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Order of agenda. If there's any additions, just to let you know that under a couple of the committee reports, there will be some motions that you don't have that weren't included in your packet, but we'll cover that when we get to that. Anything else with the order of agenda? If not, I take a motion to approve.
Move to approve the order of agenda as printed.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Order is approved. Bruce, PMC report.
Okay, I'll give a quick update on the activities over really November and the first part of December. Start with some of the technical and other activities, and then go through our remaining this month and into January, the priorities that we'll be looking at. So on the technical side, still continuing design on one of the bridge reaches. Most of the activity is going on in the Oxbow-Hixson-Baki levee area, continuing geotechnical work and survey work. Designs are underway. 35% design is completed on the southern section. It's proceeding into the 65% design phase, and the Corps is going to submit their 35% design phase for the western section of that levee right after the first of the year. In-town levees, still coordinating with the new City Hall project. The City Commission, Monday before last, approved the alignment, so with that can move forward, knowing what the new alignment is. Continuing to support the Corps with H&H and other work in kind, and then
What is H&H?
Hydrology and hydraulics, the flows and the modeling on the project for determining a lot of the impacts and other things. So we're upgrading you'll see that we're upgrading the model into what's called the phase 7.1, and then it'll be going into phase 8. So it's continued upgrading of the hydraulic model on the project. The Minnesota EIS scoping decision document is complete, and it will be released in the future once the amendment, which we'll talk about a little bit later on, is signed with the Diversion Authority. Going into other activities, the construction MOU was signed by the Diversion Authority and submitted to the Corps of Engineers. Design agreement amendment number 1 was executed just this afternoon. Colonel signed it and sent a copy up. So that's a good step that added the Diversion Authority as a sponsor to the program, and has some other things that will keep the project moving forward. So order bill is still in conference committee. We were hoping it would get out in December. It looks like it's going to be January now before that gets out. But as that schedule gets updated, we'll keep the board informed on that. We're continuing to work on land acquisition activities and other policies associated with land. Going forward into January, continuing to work on the word authorization, continuing to work on Oxbow-Hixson-Baki levee through the geotechnical design, permitting, land acquisition. We're also going to have a value-based design charrette, which is really a value engineering exercise at the end of January to bring whole team together and some outside experts to look at improving functionality and perhaps reducing cost on the on the constructed facility. In-town levies will start moving forward a little bit more now, and we'll also be looking at executing the contract amendment with the Minnesota DNR for actual execution of the EIS for the Minnesota. I think that sums it up, and I think Brett's going to give the Corps of Engineers report, unless there's any questions. Brett?
Okay.
Good afternoon. For our monthly update, we'll go through the handout that we handed out to the members at the table, Maple River physical model, and our project path forward and timetable. Again, we continue design on the outlet to reach 4. Outlet reach 1 and reach 2 are nearing technical completion. The Corps continues to support the Minnesota EIS process by providing information and attending weekly teleconferences. Maple River Aqueduct physical modeling is moving forward. Designing the ring levee around Oxbow, Hicks, and Bakke. We have met with the Rush River Water Resource District regarding different drains. And we're in the process of developing a cemetery study, or at least gathering input of what cemeteries are in the area and what kind of impacts they've had so far with flooding. Maple River physical model. Again, the physical model will allow water to cross from the Maple River across our diversion into the protected area. This is just a graphical image of what we think it may look like. And the reason for this is to maintain biological conductivity for fish and aquatic life to pass. Some of the reasons why we have the physical model is we need to evaluate plugging pressurized flow underneath the aqueduct, see what kind of characteristics we have there. We need to evaluate the flow split at the spillway and what is be allowed to go across the diversion or across the aqueduct. Structure is part of the line of protection, and because of the cost, we need to get this right the first time. The other thing with the physical model, we do have 2 aqueducts in our plan, and so the information learned for the Maple River will help us develop the aqueduct for the Cheyenne also. Physical model is being built down in Rosemont, Minnesota, just south of the cities. The scale is 50-to-1, and it's built in this building. Try to get the graphical image. This is what this is. This is how it's laid out. The spillway area is here, just as it is right in this area up there is the spillway. The bottom at the directions at the bottom, northern extent, about 300 feet upstream of 40th Avenue. Southern extent, 100 feet downstream of the diversion. East was 50 feet downstream of the downstream extent of the engineered channel, and the western extent about 600 feet upstream of the spillway mouth. Again, the structure is right in this area. This is the spillway, and the water comes across from your left going to your right. As we mentioned, this is a physical model being built. So some pictures from a site visit. They have cross sections in here that are made of sheet metal. They take our designs, cut them with laser, put them in the model, fill it up with cement blocks, and then put concrete in there to get the shape and the profile of our model. Picture up on the right shows all the pumps and pipes that they're going to have in there to recirculate the water through the system. Give you some ideas. The building's about 1,700 square feet. The model is about 80 feet long and 70 feet wide. And the primary, construction materials are concrete and plexiglass is what we use. For this model, construction be completed December, early January time period. March, they'll start doing phase 1, should be completed, and that's when we do calibrations. We had talked about before about having a tour down there. That'll be sometime in the summer. And then a year from now, December 2014, a final aqueduct modeling report will be provided to us. Again, this information will evaluate those things we talked about before and will help us to advance into plans and specifications for that feature. Some other aqueducts that has been on. The team that was down to Hennepin Canal down in Illinois. It's an aqueduct system built by the Corps in 1907, and they're just used for recreation now. And then in India, it's a little bigger, darker picture, bigger thing. It's called a super passage, where the natural channel actually goes over top of the man-made canal. This is more similar to our definition than an aqueduct, super passage. So if you hear that, it's kind of the same thing. Talk about path forward. The design agreement amendment number 1, as Bruce mentioned, was executed today by the Colonel, so we're no longer waiting on anything on that. We are waiting for federal authorization. We are continuing to review design products, provide support to the Minnesota EIS, Oxbow Hicks and Bakke coordination and ring levee design, and the construction memo of understanding (MOU) has been submitted to the diversion to the Corps division for their approval for us to execute. With that, no questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Brett? If not, thank you both. I don't know, Eric, put you on the spot. Is there any, just kind of in general sense, any updates with where are we at with the litigation matter? Yeah.
I'm trying to remember since the last meeting what might have changed because we're just in the middle of a process where the court has authorized us to intervene and set a schedule for us to file a response to the complaint of the Richland Wilkin JPA. And that response will include a motion to dismiss several of the counts, and we expect the Corps to also submit a similar type of motion. And we expect that will be heard by the court. That motion to dismiss will be heard in mid to late February. I think that date has been set. If I recall, it's the 18th, but I could be wrong about that. That's really it. So we're at the initial stage of the lawsuit. This is sort of part of the process generally to be expected.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Item number 6. Bruce, you taking that?
We've got a couple of things to ask the board for approval of as far as contract amendments. First is with the Minnesota DNR. There's an existing contract in Amendment 1 that is in place now. This would be the second amendment to that contract. It has 2 parts. The Minnesota DNR has informed us that they're going to overrun their initial budget by somewhere in the 20+ thousand. So we're requesting an additional 30,000 to complete the scoping decision document. And then once that is, as I said, that's complete, once this amendment is executed, they'll release that and begin the preparation of the EIS. In the original contract, it had a estimated cost of $750,000 for the completion of the EIS. The Minnesota DNR is still working up their exact estimate of what it will cost, but we believe it will be less than the $750,000. So what we request is that the board authorize staff, primarily Bob Zimmerman, to work with the Minnesota DNR, and if it comes in less than the $780,000 cap here, you authorize the chairman to sign the amendment to the agreement. And with that, be happy to answer any more detailed questions or toss them to Bob for discussion about the process going forward.
For the board, the back side of item 6A is, on the bottom is the recommended motion, if you so desire.
Mr. Chairman, what was the initial cost with the Minnesota DNR? What did we first start paying them? 350, 400?
Yeah, it was in the neighborhood of I think we're up to 360, 70, somewhere in that ballpark.
I mean, why is this almost double? What else? What other things are we doing?
Well, the actual preparation of the EIS will be more involved than the scoping process. So we expect the cost will be more than we've invested thus far. As Bruce said, we would, based on what we see left in the scoping decision document, we would expect it would be less than the 750. Point here is just to not delay the DNR and their process even a day. If they sent us the draft contract and we negotiated a price sometime in the next 2 weeks, we'd have to wait for the board to come back together to take action on that, and we don't want to delay their process by any time period. So the intent is to keep them moving as quickly as possible.
And are these costs engineering costs, or are they different types of costs?
There's staff costs for the DNR and also engineering costs for the DNR's consultant, which is Wink.
Didn't we hear that Minnesota now has a surplus, so can't they charge us less?
By state statute, for these kinds of processes, the project proposer is required.
Dry Mahoney.
Any other questions? If not, need action.
Motion to approve. The PMC recommends authorization of Diversion Authority to negotiate an ESI budget, preparation budget with estimated cost $750, and to execute Amendment 2 to the contract with the DNR.
Second.
Motion and a second. Further comments? Take the roll.
Mr. Vanyo?
Yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Wallaker?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Wimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Otto? Yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, can I just ask a question? On the back of this, looked like there was two recommended motions. One was for the 750 and one was for the 30.
Oh, yes.
Do we need to do both of those?
I thought you could do the lower one.
I'd be happy to do both. If it's in
Thanks.
order, Mr. Chairman, I would move authorization to increase the EIS scoping budget approximately $30,000 as part of the Amendment Number 2 contract for the DNR.
Second.
Motion and a second. Thanks, Kevin, for catching that. Anything further on that? If not, take the roll.
Mr. Vanyo?
Yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Wallaker?
Aye.
Dr. Mahoney?
Aye.
Mr. Wimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Otto? Yes.
Okay, the second one here is a authority work directive for Houston Moore Group to do some additional hydrology and hydraulic work with the Corps of Engineers, primarily updating some of the physical features in the numerical model that they have around the Maple River and other drain structures, just to give more fidelity and accuracy to the model that we use for during the design. Estimated cost of that is $25,000, and we just want to get that because that work is needed to keep the project moving.
Okay, we need a motion to approve the work directive 34.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Comments, questions? I will take the roll.
Mr. Vanyo?
Yes.
Mr. Pollak?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Wallaker?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Wimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Otto? Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item is just an update. Red River Basin Commission, Lancioi is not here, but I think a number of people will be providing the update, starting with Mark Bradshaw.
Takes three of us to fill in for Lance, I guess. He had to be in Winnipeg, and Jeff Lewis with Basin Commission needed to be in Bismarck today. I'll give a brief update on where we're at on the project. Then Zach Herman's going to take over with some slides on funding considerations. And then Pat Downs, the exec with the Red River Retention Authority, will give an update on next steps. So, Zach, what do I got to do to get to the next slide? Thank you. I only have one slide, so I don't have to worry about it after this. The items in red on there are tasks that are completed. Generally, the modeling work is done. We're waiting for some peer review comments. Minnesota DNR, I think State Water Commission in North Dakota, and the Corps were invited to give comments, and that's in the process of getting incorporated. Then the final report will be prepared, and then that part will be finished. Upcoming dates on their draft report, they have a January 1st date where that'll be complete. We're intending to have a funding assistance team meeting on January 6th. We've had kind of an ad hoc group meeting talking about how to prioritize funding to help the retention effort along. We're intending to expand that group, get a little more representation from the existing retention funding partners, the joint boards on both sides of the river, and Pat's going to talk about that a little bit more, how we envision pulling in some representation from the Diversion Authority and from the current funding partners for retention and detention. At the Basin Commission Annual Conference in January will be a presentation of this study, and the funding assistance discussion we picture will go on for a couple months as we have give and take between the Diversion Authority and the current funding partners for detention. So with that, I'll turn it over for Zach for the next step, and I'll hang around in case we have questions at the end of everything.
All right, thank you, Mark. If you guys remember from last time we met, we kind of left it with some of the information that would be available to help assist in how you could potentially prioritize your funding through this Halstead Upstream Retention Project. We looked at things, like peak flow reduction, total volume reduction, prioritized volume reduction, and how all that would fit in relation to the overall strategy that was laid out with the Halstead Upstream project. Some other considerations that we're also kind of working through, and they'll be discussed in a lot more detail in that January 6th meeting, but things like the timeline for full implementation of the plan versus how long the Diversion Authority wants to extend their funds. And also another thing that we've been kind of discussing is, how can you take that $24.5 million and essentially use it to the best of your ability, or get the most bang for your buck, essentially. So using those dollars to leverage against existing dollars to try and maximize your amount invested in retention. So this next slide, or series of slides we're going to go through in your handout, basically what we've looked at is just kind of a hypothetical 10-year funding cycle. So this first bar that you see here, the orange correlates to basically what the joint board's ability is to raise funds, or when I say the joint boards, it'd be the Red River Joint Water Resource District on the North Dakota side of the basin and the Red River Watershed Management Board on the Minnesota side of the basin. So our assumption is that those costs would be fixed because they only have a set amount of mills they can levy against their respective areas. So when you see the pie charts here, basically what they're correlating to is the existing funding matrix for each state. Now in Minnesota, in general, the Minnesota DNR typically puts in, through their flood damage reduction funds, put in about 50 to 75% of funds, and that's really allocated based on natural resource benefit versus flood damage reduction benefit. So if you can have a dual purpose project, you get more funding for them. We just assumed 60%, thought that would be about average across the board for the sites that would be implemented. The the orange there correlates to what the Red River the Red River Watershed Management Board would actually pick up. And then the red is the remaining local costs that would be paid for through things like general funds, assessments for projects, those type of things. Similar thing on the North Dakota side. They currently fund retention at 65%, but they don't fund engineering. So on average, we said for total project costs that somewhere in the range of 50% would be what the State Water Commission would pick up. The Red River Joint Water Resource District would then pick up the orange portion that you see there, and the red portion would be picked up by the state. So basically, when you look at those two pies, essentially the orange costs would be fixed, again, because of the ability to raise funds that I just talked about. So, if you're really trying to maximize where you put your funds or the Diversion Authority funding on those two funding scenarios, it would be most advantageous to put it in with the orange portion that you see there. Given those costs are fixed, it would in effect raise the available funds of that orange piece of the pie, which would give you a higher dollar amount to leverage against the state funds or the blue that you see in the bar charts there. So basically, in this 10-year funding cycle, it would equate to $2.45 million put into the funding matrix that you see there with that little green piece that's just above the orange. So when you combine the orange with the green, that would be your total funds you could then leverage against state dollars. So by putting that $24.5 million in there evenly over 10 years, what you're really in effect doing is increasing the annual or the total available funds for retention by about $85 million because you have that extra leveraging ability by putting it in with the joint board funds. And then just a hypothetical scenario that you see here is if federal money came through the Farm Bill, and there's a lot of assumptions that go into this in terms of the ability to fund and that type of thing, but discussions have been that they would cover up to 50% of cost for retention. So if that were to come in, you would have that extra $85 million that you could then leverage against federal dollars. So in effect, you'd have about $171 million with the Diversion Authority funds if federal funds were to come through. And with all these numbers here, there's a lot of assumptions that go into it. Allocation of the joint board funds, for example, whether or not it would actually go in this Halstead upstream area or if portions of it would go to some of the watershed districts and water resource districts further downstream. But again, the funding cycle, our assumption is that it would just repeat evenly over 10 years. Really what we're just trying to show you here is just something to think about in terms of where those funds could be placed to maximize your leveraging ability and in effect increasing the total amount available for implementing retention. So the next couple slides, these next two will be somewhat repetitive, but what we're trying to get at here is just, we've talked about how do you maximize your leveraging ability to increase total funds. So again, you see the existing funding scenario here. You put the Diversion Authority funding in with the orange, and you increase your 10-year funding by about $86 million. But as you can see, the red, or the local portion, actually increases by doing that too because the percentage of the red doesn't change. So if you have more costs, you're going to have more, under the same percentage, the costs are going to increase in the red area as well. So, if part of the purpose of the funding is to also kind of expedite the process and further incentivize locals to actually implement retention within the basin, you really want to think about, well, maybe some of that green could be allocated into that red portion that you see. So, just one hypothetical that we looked at here was, well, what if you just said across the board you didn't want the local cost to exceed 8%? So if you were to do that, you would have to take some of those green costs, or when I say green, the Diversion Authority costs, and use them in the local or the red part. So you would basically, as you can see from the bar chart, you reduce the local portion, but by doing that, you're also removing funds that could be used to leverage with the joint board expenditures, so then you reduce your total funding. So under this scenario, you still do see an increase in funding from the existing condition, but it's slightly reduced from the kind of the maximized leveraging scenario. So these are just some concepts that we've been kind of working through there. We're still working through the process in terms of coming up with some potential recommendations for funding and things like that. But just some things for you guys to think about as we move forward here. So I'll turn it over to Pat now.
Thanks, Zach. Again, Pat Downs with the Red River Retention Authority. We're kind of ready to pass the baton on to the next steps, is what we're envisioning. Since you guys signed the contract to do business with the Red River Basin Commission last October, okay, now we've ground through the modeling and seen the results, and we understand the lay of the land, what retention can and cannot do, and it can certainly improve the quality of life for all of us if we can hoard some water upstream before it hits the mighty red all at one time, which is never a good thing. So some of our next steps is we're kind of put together a ad hoc committee that they talked about as far as, and we're going to add Jason and Bob Zimmerman and Mark Bittner and April Walker to that group. As far as we grind through, we're going to have our first meeting on January 6th, just focusing on financing. Has nothing to do with modeling and all that stuff because that's behind us. And at that point, I think we will, we're going to spend enough time at it, we may have a draft or a concept of how we may see your dollars could be invested. And at that point, we would probably want to visit with your finance committee to bring those recommendations forward. And if you got some other ideas at the finance committee, that's certainly a time we can alter course or change things at that point too. So that's kind of our next steps. So in the next 3 weeks or so, we'll be plotting ahead as far as working on the funding mechanism. And it should be something we can come together on fairly quickly and fairly easily, because our retention projects are usually there's flow components and acre feet of storage. That's kind of the crux of how they work. So that committee is underway. Everybody's had their invites, so we're ready to get that done. At some point, we would hope there would be an agreement somehow, some way, some fashion with the Red River Retention Authority. That's kind of what we envisioned in the beginning. And your guys' direct connection to the Retention Authority is Roger. He is on the board of the Retention Authority. And as you're aware, we are a multi-jurisdictional group. My two owners or parents are the Red River Water Management Board and the Red River Joint Water Resource District. So we got the Minnesota, North Dakota covered. We cover all the geography of the areas. We have the 5 watersheds in North Dakota that are technically upstream of Halstead and the 3 in Minnesota. Going forward, project-wise, as far as getting dollars invested, how quickly and where, the Upper Maple River Dam was just funded by the State Water Commission. That Water Board has gone forward with that project. It's ready to be built next summer. It'll be 5,000 acre feet. Very nice little project. Red Path, which is down in the Bois de Sioux watershed, it'll actually store water before it gets into, in the Mustinka River, before it gets into Lake Traverse. So it'll add actually capacity to Traverse. It does also, during high 100-year type flows, stop the breakouts that actually go north into the Rabbit River and then come directly into the Red. So it could be a very beneficial project. As far as other projects, there are many on the drawing board now that all the water boards have their comprehensive plans with the many, many sites at their disposal to study and understand. They can move much quicker as far as picking a site. Of course, then we have to go through the process of the permitting, the financing, and your dollars will be important to help all that happen. So that's where we're at today and ready to go forward. Questions for any of the three of us?
Thank you, Pat, Zach, and Mark. I guess I'm pleased to see that the wheels continue to turn, with regard to various efforts here, I guess, to solve problems. And retention, as we know, is part of the puzzle. It's not the answer, but and the hypotheticals that were there with regard to the financing, it's good to know the leveraging models that you have there. Of course, there's some pretty big ifs in terms of, those dollars. But I like the committee structure that you put together and to work on this, and I'm pleased about that. Any comments or questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving down to Public Outreach Committee.
In your handouts, you'll find the Public Outreach Committee report. I'll briefly go through them. The diversion had a presence in Bismarck at the Water Users Conference this past week. And the Diversion Authority hosted a booth at the conference, and it was very well accepted with a lot of flow through the booth and a lot of questions that were asked and answered. And I also was able to present to a large group of water managers and presented the project and some of the issues that we were working through. And I fielded many questions that were very good questions, and actually we ran out of time for questions, so we'll have to readdress that. The report on the diversion project was given to the governor and the State Water Commission at their meeting on last Friday. That went well. We gave updates. Keith gave an update on the project, and I gave an update on ag issues and issues in the upstream area. Minnesota Ag and Rural Leadership Program, Commissioner Everett and Bob Zimmerman, Sharon Josephson from Peterson's office spoke to the group, and what I understand, they did an excellent job, and I've heard good reports back from that meeting. And in conjunction with the Corps, a flyover video was developed to illustrate the path of the diversion along with key design features associated with it. We used this flyover video in the booth in Bismarck, and it actually drew people into the booth, and people seemed to stay longer and ask questions. It's a very good piece of work to use to really visualize what and where this project will lay on the land. Oxbow, Hickson, Bakke, Ring Levy participated in a public meeting held by the city of Oxbow to inform residents of the timeline for the Ring Levy construction and what options those homeowners that are having to be bought out would have through the construction phase, and what options they'll have to either be bought out and leave, bought out and move within the ring dike, or bought out and then move their house into a new area. The Red River Basin Commission Conference. The Diversion Authority is participating in two presentations at the RRBC conference, and that's in Fargo on the January 14th through the 16th. Federal update. I think we heard that update from Brett. And then online and media presence. We continue to update legislators and other stakeholders and the public through our e-newsletter update. And the fmdiversion.com continues to receive new hits on its website with the ability to provide good information for people that are willing to go out and visit our website. Thank you.
Thanks, Roger. So as you indicated, we'll be seeing that after the meeting. That's the video, I mean. Yeah, okay. Very good. It's at the bottom of the your agenda? I think it is. Or no, let me announce it here. There's a social at the Radisson following the meeting here, so if people can attend that, that's what Roger was referring to in terms of the video being shown there. It's certainly that social is open to people here and I guess in the audience that are part of this process. I think it's in the loft, Rocky, right? So you'll have an opportunity to see that. I'll mention again at the end of the meeting. Any questions for Roger? Thank you, Roger. Next item is land management, or the Business Leaders Task Force. Ann? Any report? Okay. Thank you. Tom was in another meeting, so and was kind enough to attend here. Public outreach, Mayor?
Okay, we had a report by Mark Bradshaw that pretty well summarized land management summary and what's going on in Oxbow and so forth, and they seem to be on top, so that's a good committee to move it forward. A motion was moved to accept the recommendation of the Finance Committee that if opportunities arise for land acquisitions that would benefit the project and need to be acted on quickly, Finance Committee or a smaller group comprised of Pat Zavrell, Darrell Vanyo, and Mike Montplaisir will be the contact points and provide guidance on acquiring that land. So that was passed and forwarded to the Diversion Authority for a similar motion, right?
Yes. Just a little bit of background. There's another handout here that you have that kind of gives the bullet points of pretty much what we talked about in land management, kind of the background for all of this. And as the mayor read the motion that came from the Land Management Committee, I think it summarizes pretty much what you see in a longer motion here, and you're certainly welcome to. But the bottom line is that to expedite any potential opportunities that may exist for land that is available in the footprint, and we never know when those things come up. We felt that the vehicle, in terms of the purchase, is going through the Cass County Joint Water Board, but there needs to be guidance provided. That guidance is, as we indicated in the motion, to be provided by the Finance Committee and Pat and myself and Mike Montplaisir in terms of direct contacts. So that's kind of what you see in this motion, as well as the motion that the mayor read that came from the land management. So I'd open it to any questions you might have. Obviously, we do have a budget for next year. Part of, as it indicates here, a portion of that is for land acquisition, so it's already been approved. And I would open up for any questions or comments.
Yeah,
Kevin?
Mr. Chairman, when it comes to, for example, I don't know what kind of land we're talking about here. I would assume that the potential is for some ag land to possibly be involved with that.
Yes.
And I would hope that there would be a plan in place that if we were to purchase that we would have a mechanism in place to get that back to tillable land, whether it's through something established or lease or whatever, so that I would assume that's part of the plan.
That's another thing we addressed is that Mark is going to work, I believe, with A2S in terms of getting someone to manage that. In other words, we've had management for properties in Oxbow, but that's totally different than ag land.
Right.
And so they're going to be going through a RFP process and all that, and they'll come back to us at a future point in terms of who's going to manage any of those lands. So I think that addresses your question.
Thank you.
I would ask for either an approval of the motion that the mayor had or what you have before you, which is pretty much the same thing. Commissioner Pollack?
Mr. Chairman, I hereby move that the Diversion Board of Authority authorize the Cass County Joint Water Resource Board to spend up to $76 million for land acquisition in 2014. The Cass County Joint Water Resource Board is authorized to make decisions regarding which parcels to purchase, timing of purchase, and purchase price on behalf of the Diversion Authority. In addition to property within the project footprint, the board may also purchase property located elsewhere for future land trades. The Cass County Joint Water Resource Board will consult as necessary with Fargo and Cass County administrators and with the Finance Committee. The Cass County Joint Water Resource Board will periodically report to the Diversion Board of Authority, but needn't seek Finance Committee or Board of Authority approval for individual property purchases.
Pat, would you kind of cover why it's 76 here? I mean, there's 38 in our budget, but
Second.
Oh, thank you, thank you, Tim.
We've got a $70 million budget, 38 of which has been identified for property acquisition. As we have it with the agreement with the state for land purchases exclusive of buildings, they will match us with those dollars. And so in theory, if we were to purchase all land, it could go up to 76,000. But in terms of or 76 million. But in terms of prioritization right now, of course, our first priority is to work with Oxbow in the purchase of the homes. The second would be any property that or land that would be available for the ring levies around Oxbow. The third priority would be properties that would be in the footprint that would be available, or for example, we had an opportunity to purchase some land where there was going to be a structure constructed on the Wild Rice River that was available to us under auction. And so those would be the priorities. As we move forward, then there will be other priorities brought to the Land Management Committee and this board to reprioritize, for example, in the staging area or wherever else. But at this time, that would be the priority.
Thank you.
I'd just like to add, Pat, I think that's good that you have that priority. I think that we should also keep in there the priority that we've had from day one, and that's hardships as well.
Yes.
If more of those were to
Yeah.
show up, we should include those as well.
Any further comments? Not, we'll take the roll.
Mr. Vanyo?
Yes.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Thorstith?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Wallaker?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Wimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Otto?
Yes.
Okay. That concludes the Land Management. Finance Committee?
Good afternoon. I'd refer you to page 9B in your packet. It's the one with the two yellow things on there. And this is really the report of where we've been since inception, 2011, 12, and then 13 in cumulative, showing both the revenue sources and the expenditures. So the next page is our budget, and that's where we have the $70 million budget for the fiscal year, which is starting October 1st this year, and current month, and then fiscal year to date and remaining budget. As a kind of an update on what's happened this last couple of weeks, we have closed on the Oxbow purchase, and we funded that through county and city funds. The city is also making a claim to the State Water Commission to get reimbursed part of those costs, and so we're still doing that on a cash basis and are continuing on a cash basis for the time being. And Keith, I think you were going to cover the engineering.
Yes, thank you, Mike. We, Finance Committee, also reviewed the proposed engineering rate schedule for the Houston Moore Group yesterday, and is recommending approval of that schedule. A copy of that rate schedule has been included in your packet, so we would like to see a motion to adopt that 2014 rate schedule.
Mr. Chairman, Keith, how is that in comparison? One time we were asked to increase the rates by 2 or 3%. How does this relate to the 213 fees?
This is about 6% over their 2012 schedule. If you recall, last year we decided to not give an increase at all, so they used their 2012 rates throughout 2013. So this year, this one is reflecting about a 6% increase from that 2012 schedule.
Have any of the other engineering firms come in with the same rate increase?
This would actually be applicable to each of the 5 firms in the Houston Moore Group. We hadn't. I guess we did agree to an amendment some months ago with CH2M Hill, which included their rate schedule, but I don't recall exactly how percentage-wise how their 14 schedule compared to their 13 schedule.
And then how does this relate to inflationary changes over the last 2 years?
I think it's it's competitive given the engineering profession. I get what we're seeing. I think with the engineering firms, like some of the construction firms, is there's a high demand, especially for engineering technicians, with the amount of construction work that's going on. So I think a 3% a year inflation is probably a competitive rate.
Any other questions?
Well, that's not a bias because you're an engineer, is it?
I don't get the increase.
We take good care of Keith. And Jason.
Does he want us to go there? I don't want to go there. What are the doctor rates been like lately? Are your rates holding?
Listen to the feds, it's going down.
There's no further comments. I'd entertain a motion to approve.
Mr. Chairman, I would make that motion.
Second.
Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Is that the end, Mike?
Otherwise, we have the bills for December, and these are the non-contract type bills. So
Okay, it's $52,172.99.
correct.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Take the roll.
Mr. Vano?
Yes.
Mr. Pollock?
Yes.
Mr. Thorsted?
Yes.
Mr. Olson?
Yes.
Mr. Wallaker?
Yes.
Dr. Mahoney?
Yes.
Mr. Wimmer?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell?
Yes.
Ms. Otto? Yes.
Any other business?
When's our next meeting?
We had talked about not having a January meeting because it's January 9th would be the normal meeting date. Bob, you had indicated, or if anyone, if something comes up, some people could get in touch, or at least Keith, know, say January 2nd or 3rd, so that we would have advanced, so we could put the wheels in motion to meet. Otherwise, there will be not be a meeting in January, and we'll convene at our regular scheduled date in February. 13th of February. Is that okay?
It's Valentine's Eve.
Oh, boy.
Well, last year it was Valentine's Day that we met here.
Yeah. So, barring anything that needs our getting together, we will not meet in January. Roger?
The joint board might have a request for funds. We'll be closing on a property on about the 30th of January, 31st of January. And at our meeting this morning, I said, well, we got a meeting January 9th, but we don't need to put that request in today. So I
stand correct.
I'm at fault. So maybe Mark can address.
Why don't we work with Mike and see if we see a need to get approval to handle that, we'll request a meeting January 9th. But if we can figure out another way to do it, we'll just leave it the way Darrell suggested.
Okay. Thanks, Mark.
Okay. And again, a reminder, all are welcome to the Radisson, the Loft, for a social. I think there's some hors d'oeuvres and a cash bar, and we'll see the video of flyover of the diversion channel. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.